When you give someone legal speed and give them a complex cognitive task, it takes them longer to do it. No shit. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ryan, and this is the Thunder Channel. On nootropics, on testosterone, on biohacking, and on male performance. Please subscribe to the channel. If you're into that stuff, hit the bell to get notified of all future content. And I really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, bro. Honestly, I mean, you know, no pressure or anything, but it really makes a difference, bro. Do it for John. Do it for John's dog. All right, you guys know the routine. We would not exist without the support of the products that I built. I built a couple nootropic products. You can find them at livecortex.com. The most prominent of them is a Torque Stack. Also built a bunch of downloadable guides which give you powerful stacks and teach you how to use nootropics the right way. And you can get all that stuff in the description of this video. Okay, so recently I was browsing the Nootropics 2.0 Facebook group. This is the Facebook group right here. It's actually a pretty cool group. Here, let me show you guys. Bam, son. Oh, wrong one. Bam. Bam, son. It's just a group of 12,800 members that's been around for a long time, a very long time. I think they boot members that are talking about shit that are other than nootropics. That's why the group number is actually somewhat low. But I mean, it's been around for many, many years. And this post came up called LOL. Nootropics may actually make you dumber if you already have normal dopamine. And we'll get into, so I tracked down the actual article here because it actually wasn't in the link despite what the guy said. And we're going to get into like why this is like just another example of mainstream talking about nootropics in a completely inaccurate way and doing these weird errors in extrapolation, which I want to describe for you. All right, so I'm just going to run through this real quick for you guys. It goes, and this is on neurosciencenews.com, okay? It goes, summary, cognitive enhancers, often dubbed as smart drugs, might actually impair performance and productivity in neurotypical individuals. The study evaluated the effects of 3 widely used smart drugs using a complex decision-making task simulating everyday scenarios. It goes, it was discovered that participants taking these drugs exhibited decreases in accuracy and efficiency and required more time and effort to complete tasks compared to those on placebo. These results question the efficacy of cognitive enhancers in individuals without cognitive deficits like ADHD. All right, so key facts, right? It goes, the study employed double-blind randomized trials involving 40 healthy participants who took either a popular smart drug, methylphenidate, modafinil, or dextroamphetamine or placebo. Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. Number 2, participants were given computationally complex tasks represented of real-life cognitive challenges. They experienced a decrease in performance and increase in task completion time when on the drugs compared to placebo. So their performance was worse and it took them longer to ultimately complete these tasks they had them do. Number 3, the study's results challenge the common belief that cognitive enhancers or smart drugs can improve cognitive performance in neurotypically functional individuals. Okay, so right off the bat, as some of you might imagine that I'm going to say, where they already have this wrong and the study sort of invalidates itself is that we don't consider those cognitive enhancers or smart drugs. These aren't nootropics or smart drugs, which are used interchangeably. The only rare exception is modafinil, right? It's got some action on keeping dopamine around and fostering function of orexin peptides. So, you know, as to keep you awake and functional and not, you know, drowsy. But methylphenidate and dextroamphetamine are not smart drugs. In no way, shape, or form do we ever, as a community, ever even conflate the two. We're talking about fucking meth, legal meth, versus like, you know, piracetam. I mean, completely different chemicals. So as, again, great example of how mainstream always fucks this up and conflates the two. Okay, that said, in 4 double-blinded randomized trials in Melbourne, each a week apart, the same 40 healthy participants took 1 to 3 popular smart drugs, methylphenidate, modafinil, or dextroamphetamine, or a placebo. They were assessed on how they performed in a test designed to model complex decision-making and a problem-solving present in our everyday lives. So what did they just say that was absolutely ridiculous? Okay, yeah. Drugs such as methylphenidate, sold under the brand name Ritalin, among others, are commonly prescribed for attention deficit hyperactivity, but are also taken by those without a diagnosis in the belief that the drugs will enhance focus and cognitive performance. Yes, maybe that's true. But this is not what we're talking about, okay, over here on this channel and every other nootropics like channel or whatever, biohacker that discusses nootropics. We're not talking about Ritalin. In fact, we frown upon it. We don't believe people should be using it. You know, I get clients that come on board that we get them off of Adderall, Vyvanse, and switch them onto other chemicals. You know, they keep using this phrase cognitive enhancers, right? And in it, they're talking about methylphenidate. They're talking about basically legal meth and modafinil. Hey, newsflash, like Cambridge, we're talking about piracetam, aniracetam, oxiracetam, phenylpiracetam, acetyl L-carnitine, L-tyrosine, uridine monophosphate, triacetyluridine, Nupept, C-Lank, C-Max. We're talking about chemicals like pycnogenol, vinpocetine, non-neurotransmitter modifying nootropics like alpha-lipoic acid. We're talking about chemicals like DMAE, choline bitartrate, alpha-GPC, citicoline. We are not talking about Ritalin. Nor are we talking about any of the amphetamine analogs. We're just not. So again, the study's already invalidated, and so is the Facebook post. Because I'm going to get to this in a second. What the OP here, or the original poster, tried to do was conflate these chemicals in their actions on dopamine. Because the whole point here with this guy's post is, LOL, nootropics may actually make you dumber. Like, again, it's almost as if like mainstream like slid their inaccurate point of view, conflating, you know, nootropics, some of which I just listed, with some of these other chemicals which are not nootropics at all, and then fooled this guy Anthony Ramos into believing that nootropics are those things. Okay, so, and here's a great point. So back to the study design and like what they actually did. Participants were asked to complete an exercise known as the knapsack optimization problem, or knapsack tasks, in which they were given a virtual knapsack with a set capacity and a selection of items of different weights and values. The participants had to figure out how to best allocate items to the bag to maximize the overall value of its contents. Okay, got it. Yeah, pretty good exercise. Overall, participants taking the drugs saw small decreases in accuracy and efficiency, along with large increases in time and effort relative to the results when not taking the drugs, relative to the results when they're didn't take the drugs, but not taking the drugs. So in other words, when you give someone legal speed and give them a complex cognitive task, it takes them longer to do it. No shit. And that's because in these types of cases, this is a cerebrally intensive cognitive task. It's a cognitive task, right? You would not want to be taking something that is exclusively a stimulant for that task. You'd want to be taking something that modifies the neurotransmitter system that actually makes you function better in those types of capacities. And you guys know what I'm going to say. That's the cholinergic system. So rather than giving them like high speed, like brain juice, like, you know, meth basically legally, if you wanted to test whether or not nootropics, which these aren't, would improve performance in these areas, you would administer either one of the racetams or another cholinergically active chemical that is modifying acetylcholine concentrations or receptor sites or general neuronal signaling. And again, you do that with aniracetam, oxiracetam, phenylpiracetam, piracetam, pramiracetam, DMAE, alpha-GPC, citicoline, acetyl L-carnitine, all these chemicals that modify that system, which the dopaminergics don't. Never have I suggested, or does anybody in the nootropics community, if they're worth their salt, suggest that in a cognitively demanding task that you use a dopaminergic for that, right? The dopaminergics are really baseline energy and motivation. That's what they're for, because we understand what dopamine does as a neurotransmitter. The cholinergics are for these type of tasks. So already it's like the designers of the study and the authors of this article like really don't quite understand like what they're trying to prove, right? I mean, their whole contention is dead in the water if at the very fundamental level they're not understanding that cholinergics are for the demanding cognitive task, whereas the dopaminergics are for motivation. I mean, they're not even discerning between or differentiating between neurotransmitter systems and which chemicals do what for what task. I mean, that's like mistake number 2, because mistake number 1 is conflating fucking Adderall with, you know, something like phenylpiracetam. They go on to like detail how, you know, giving someone legal meth would make them take longer. Yeah, like I don't think that's very much a surprise, and saying that they took 50% longer on average to complete the knapsack problems as when they were given placebo. Placebo being they were in their regular state. They go on to basically like talk about like how, you know, limited these people's productivity was in these cognitive tasks and how they didn't function well compared to the folks taking the placebo or folks at baseline, which makes complete sense. Listen, if you administer Adderall, this is one of the primary reasons that when people come to me for consulting, or when we all, the nootropics community, encounter a person that is using Adderall or Vyvanse or a hardcore dopamine reuptake inhibitor, something that's like binding to the dopamine transporter and preventing it from recycling dopamine, or something that's otherwise keeping dopamine around synaptically, like we try to steer them away from those chemicals and move them more toward more sustainable chemicals that may have action on dopamine, fine, which will invariably and inevitably produce far less side effects than these very, very hardcore dopamine reuptake inhibitor drugs. But at the same time, if they're doing cognitively demanding tasks, I mean, it's not even like one of those like industry secrets or something. Like everybody knows that you use cholinergics for those things, and or maybe something that's mildly dopaminergic like teocrine, but also energy and wakefulness inducing so that the person can function better. All right, so like that's basically the end of it. What I find interesting about this is from a well-respected university, dude. Okay, Cambridge University is a well-respected university. Like, what are these people doing? Like, how is it that a university that like fancies themselves in an extremely high echelon intellectually and in terms of education, that they won't do the very basic research of the basic work, right? It's just lazy thinking of peering into the nootropics community and cognitive enhancers and smart drugs, which again are used interchangeably to understand exactly what it is that we're taking to optimize performance versus what they think it is. It's the same shit, right? Mainstream does this all the time. It's like so lazy, like, hey, it almost like is so ironic, right? That they're saying, hey, like dopamine smart drugs like make you dumber. Yet they have this like lazy cognitive orientation not to actually know what the fuck they're talking about before they talk about it, rendering them like seemingly the dumb one in the exchange. It just doesn't make sense. But it doesn't surprise me because, I mean, honestly, this is probably going to offend some people and that's all good. But that's kind of how like the educational orthodoxy is, right? Like sometimes they couldn't see something right in front of them. Anyway, so yeah, debunked completely. So let's just go to this thread on Facebook and just kind of discuss this. So yeah, this Ramos guy, I'm not sure if he's a nootropics user or what was the intention behind that, but he's actually friends with a guy that I'm friends with named Seth Heiner, who is a smart dude and would probably look at this and be like, oh God, they conflated, racetams with, methylphenidate again, and in the comment section, like you have a person already like calling it out, methylphenidate, modafinil, or dextro, amphetamine. And you got me there, pretty much. Idiotic mainstream being idiotic again. Shocked. But then you got the author who goes, and this guy later, submitted and went, hey, I'm not sure I understand what's going on here. He goes, many newts also operate through dopamine like these drugs. And I responded, yeah, which ones exactly? With conclusive literature, please. Well-respected journals, preferably with clear mechanisms of action comparable to Adderall and Vyvanse. Because if you want to make the point that other nootropics are acting through dopamine and thus would provide the same results as the study, well, the mechanisms of action have to be the same, right? A dopamine reuptake inhibition from a pharmaceutical drug, that mechanism of action is extremely different than like enhanced communication between hemispheres via optimization of the corpus callosum, which is one of the things that piracetam does, or enhanced hippocampal cholinergic release, which is what some of the primary racetams do to kind of speed up memory encoding, or the enhanced expression of nerve growth factor, which is what Pep does, among other things. He tried to make the argument that like some nootropics, like nicotine as an example, do potentiate dopamine release. But again, this is just not comparable at all. Like you couldn't take it's like a little bit of extra striatal dopamine release that nicotine is inducing and compare that to massively available synaptic levels of dopamine, extracellular dopamine induced by a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. They're just not the same thing at all. They're not comparable. And any other dopaminergic nootropic, like, is just not going to be as strong. Like even if you were to administer something very, very hardcore, like say you took a stack of 500 milligrams mucuna purines, which is going to give you a usable dopamine by getting in the middle of the tyrosine to dopa conversion and just providing L-dopa, which is then going to convert via dopa decarboxylase right to dopamine. And then you add in on top of that something like bromontane, which is just helping you synthesize more of your own regular precursor of tyrosine into more dopamine, and you stack those two together, say the bromontane was like 75 milligrams, call it a high dose. You still wouldn't even come close to the synaptically available dopamine that methylphenidate, Ritalin, Adderall, Vyvanse, that those chemicals would put into place. And the same is true with like, uridine or uridine analogs, the Mr. Happy Stack in general. The only thing dopaminergic about the Mr. Happy Stack is actually just the uridine monophosphate. Some people substitute the originally instructed alpha GPC or glycerylphosphorylcholine with cytidine 5-diphosphylcholine to give it more of a dopaminergic potentiation. But even then, so still not even close to being comparable to a hardcore pharmaceutical DRI. Saffron extract, I'm not even sure saffron is dopaminergic. Predominantly that works as it relates to brain performance by scavenging free radicals and reducing oxidative stress. So that's not a dopaminergic at all. And though solbutamine will force a little bit of extra dopamine release, as will its analogs like TTFD and regular B1, it's not comparable to a DRI. Again, you got dopamine reuptake inhibition, which is either binding to the dopamine transporter or by some other mechanism creating a lot of extracellular dopamine, and then you have this mild dopaminergic release that's region specific in the brain, induced by a chemical that's mechanism of action neurotransmitter wise is predominantly something else, like nicotine, right, binding to the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, or aniracetam, which may get you to release a little extra dopamine, which its primary mechanism of action has to do with cholinergic release in the hippocampus and the modulation of AMPA receptors. So you know what, look, I don't even want to blame this guy, Anthony. Like, totally cool, bro, all good. I'm probably gonna post this like as a comment, but I do want to say that there has been a mild epidemic. I don't want to be like dramatic here, but there's just been a gross misunderstanding for many years, from when I started talking about nootropics on the web 15 years ago and administering them 16, 17 years ago, where it's like mainstream still has not evolved from their position that smart drugs are Adderall. And this whole like other plethora of probably about 45 chemicals, again, ranging from all those chemicals that I discussed before to things like N-acetyl L-tyrosine, to cerebrolysin, to chemicals like Bacopa monnieri, to compounds like methylliberine, dynamine and teocrine. It's just like a completely different reservoir of chemicals, mechanisms wise and safety wise and toxicity wise and otherwise, than, the run of the mill commonly prescribed, like, general physician prescribed for like the fact that you have fatigue, which is probably driven by something else, but they don't want to get to the bottom of that. Adderall, Ritalin, Vyvanse, etc. Again, the only exception here is modafinil. Now, we don't know out of those 40 people how many of them were taking modafinil, so that would be interesting to look at. And at the same time, we also know that in cases of like administering a stimulant dopaminergic without properly understanding like what dose, dialing in the dose is going to be effective for you is a haphazard way to then set someone up for a cognitive task. It actually sets them up for failure, right? Because plenty of people are going to take 200 milligrams of modafinil and have a little bit of extracellular dopamine, but predominantly have that work on the orexin system and thus wakefulness, and they're not going to perform well. They're going to probably perform worse, and they're going to feel crappy because it's way overstimulating because the dose isn't right for them. Modafinil is very, very powerful stuff, and if you're not used to it and someone just gives you 200 milligrams of modafinil, which wasn't elucidated, by the way, the doses, and then puts you on some cognitive task, and you're sitting there like stimulated out of your mind because you're not used to that very, very potentiated kind of dopaminergic and wakefulness response, like, yeah, no shit, it's going to take you way longer to do what you're doing. Like, you're not going to be effective at a cognitive task. Not to mention, again, dopaminergics are not for cognitive tasks. They're really for energy and motivation. I mean, that's kind of like very fundamental. I mean, it's like 101 in the nootropics community. What would be interesting here, so yeah, Anthony, like, we're all good, bro. I just wanted to do this video because, again, this whole conflating of some of these chemicals with this whole other reservoir of nootropics that we're talking about is just how do you say it? It's just a very repeated kind of injustice, and it's just like this topic of confusion and, again, lazy thinking from the educational orthodoxy. But I would say this, if these guys really actually wanted to do something cool, what they should do is take some of the cholinergic racetams and maybe even a semi-complex stack of a racetam, an adequately dosed choline source, and then a mild stimulant on top of that, like a methylxanthine, which would be a well put together stack. And now you're hitting all of the targets that you would need for a cognitively demanding, cerebrally intensive task, like extra energy via the adenosine receptor antagonism and enhanced kind of general cognitive processing via the cholinergic function or pathway optimization, and then have them rerun the fucking knapsack text. That would be interesting. That would be a study worth doing. But again, I'm not sure that Cambridge or any of the folks from the EDU world are going to stop being intellectually lazy enough to actually get a little more nuanced about what they're talking about regarding nootropics. So sorry, Cambridge, your article doesn't make sense, nor does your study. And your argument here is actually provably fallacious. Like it's actually provably a fallacy to conflate methylphenidate with all the rest of the nootropics that we commonly talk about. And then to do a study with a dopaminergic, which actually, in order to be performed appreciably well, requires the activation of cholinergic pathways. And you're not dosing a cholinergic in this study. So, I mean, again, it's dead in the water, from the gate. All right, I hope that makes sense, guys. As I said in the beginning, so I do have some specials for you on the Torque Stack. Torque Stack is still 30% off. Torque is focus, mental energy, lots of motivation, predominantly a dopaminergic, but there is a mild cholinergic enhancement with some cytidine 5-diphosphocholine in this stack. It's very, very potent. Turns on in about 25 minutes. People notice it anywhere between 4.5 and 8 hours, and it's very strong. We have a 2-day shipping option on Torque, so you can get that at livecortex.com. Punch the coupon code in 30TORQUE. That will save 30% and take it right off of the price. You're getting it uber cheap. Someone recently told me that I was doing a bad job of explaining what I do consulting wise. Yeah, look, for the average person that needs some email advice about some problem relating to physiology or nootropics or TRT, there's email consults and call consults that you can get on with me to solve those issues, ranging all the way from the bottom up price wise. But some of these bigger packages, a guy just came on board that is running marketing for 3 different online casinos. If you're a high level business person and you need to be functioning 16 hours a day, but you also need to sleep well, and you need to rotate between very highly effective targeted nootropic stacks for you, as well as if we need to optimize testosterone or other biomarkers to make you function well, that is my specialty. I'm one of the world's foremost experts at doing this, and you can hire me for one of these bigger packages in under a minute at livecortex.com. All right, everybody, I just got an update, by the way, from the new product manufacturing facility on Cortex, and it looks like we're about 6 weeks out. Okay, so likely end of July, at the very latest, early August, the new Cortex stack will be out and available for you to purchase. So pay attention to that. Look forward to it, as this thing is going to make waves, my friends. Other than that, no other announcements. Live stream coming this weekend, but we'll talk about that later on in the week. More content to come. Thanks for being with me. Please hit the like button if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're into anything that I just said. I would really appreciate that, bro. And I will talk to you on the next one.